of all, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. We've had rotten luck in the last almost 2 weeks with weather. We had 2 events scheduled, one for Orson Bailey Island at the schoolhouse, which we had to cancel because of the ice storm. And then we had a meeting scheduled for Kellogg Church the next day, which we had to cancel as well. And now it's raining, so I guess from our standpoint, this is pretty good weather, but I wanted to thank everybody for coming. This is an opportunity for you folks to listen at a top level to what the comprehensive plan is all about, but more importantly, for us to listen to what you have to say about what's in the plan. And I realize that most everybody has not gone through this plan. It's a pretty thick document. We have some summaries of it over to the side here. But I want to make a couple of points up front. First of all, I want everybody to understand that the comprehensive plan that we put together is not what you would call a regulatory document. That is, it doesn't mean that if the plan is approved, ordinances are going to change, zoning is going to change, new programs are going to appear, and so on. It is not that kind of document at all. It is a guideline. It's an expression of where the town thinks it is, what the priorities of the town are, and where they would like the town to go in the future. Details about changing ordinances and so on and so forth must be done by town meeting through a vote of the town. So what we're talking about here is not something that's going to govern everything in the future. This is an advisory guideline which hopefully expresses what the town thinks is important, where we are now, what's important to the town, and where we want to go in the next 10 or 15 years. The other thing I would like to say is that this plan is truly comprehensive. It may appear as though it focuses on a few things, but if you go through this plan, it covers a lot of territory. It not only covers the working waterfront, for example, the fishing community and everything that's associated with that. It covers transportation, it covers economy in the town. It covers housing, potential housing considerations that folks have thought were important, and so on and so forth. So I would encourage everybody to keep that in mind, even though it may appear as though certain focus areas come out in the plan. It really is a comprehensive document. And we're required to do that by the state. The state has identified a number of different areas that have to be included in a comprehensive plan. We've covered that, and we've actually covered and added to that to focus on what's important to Harpswell. What I want to do at this point is to turn the meeting over to Judy Colby-George, who is the head consultant for this program, and she is going to provide sort of a high-level, top-level review of the plan, and then we'll open it up for your comments, your input, and we can go from there. Just as an aside, we're going to take what comes out of this meeting, we broadcast, or not broadcast, but videotape, and we're taking good notes on it. The task force is going to meet tomorrow night at 6:30 in the town office, and we're going to go over what we heard tonight, what we heard at Cundy's Harbor a couple of weeks ago, and say, is there anything that we can do to make this plan as it stands right now, which is a draft, better? And so I want you to be sure that and feel comfortable with the fact that we're going to take action whatever happens here today. Before I pass the mic over, I would like to just ask everybody that's involved with the plan, please stand up. go ahead, Dave, start with you. Dave Brown. And Dave. Kevin Johnson, who's the selectman, who's been our liaison with the select board. Come on, Phil, get up. Phil Taylor, Brian Hurst, George Prince, Matt Gilley, and let's see, Amy Heibel, who's the vice chair. If anybody else is here, all right, and Kayla, who's provided administrative support. Thank you, everybody. This has been over a 2-year effort, but I want everybody to understand this is not our plan. This is your plan. And so you need to feel comfortable with it. And that's why meetings like this are important. And we want to understand what your thoughts and feelings are. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Judy.
Thanks everybody for coming. My name is Judy Colby-George, and I'm a consultant from a company called Viewshed. And Madeline Tripp is here, and Rachel and Mindy were the other consultants working on the plan with us, so they're here to answer questions. If you have questions about any particular topic, they were did a lot of the economy parts of the plans and the natural resource parts of the plans. So we have them here for answering questions. So our agenda for tonight, Al's done the introductions. We're going to go through, he's covered some of this, so I'll skip through some of it quickly, but what's the purpose of having the public hearing? Why do an update? Why have a comp plan? An overview of the plan, and then the key areas of the plan, and most of the time I'll spend talking about the land use districts. So the purpose of this public hearing is for us to hear your feedback, and we really do want to hear it. And if you have questions, we are here to answer them for you. And we will be taking notes, and we will be then putting all those notes together into a list, which the task force is going to go through tomorrow and make decisions about. So the question of why update the plan. So your existing comprehensive plan was adopted in 2005. The state recognizes comprehensive plans for 12 years, so your plan's been out of date for some time. And much of the plan wasn't implemented, especially around the land use parts of the plan. Other parts were implemented, like a lot of related to open space and recreation and things like that. A lot of that did get implemented, so that's where you stand now. But having a non-approved comprehensive plan means that you're ineligible for certain, especially for community development block grants. You can't apply for them unless you have an approved comp plan. And when you apply for other state grants, you get more points if you have an approved comprehensive plan. So that's the reason to have one, and also because it's a good thing to have. Because what a comprehensive plan does is it creates a guide for your future, and it makes recommendations for future actions. It also, the idea of it being that because it's so comprehensive, that it creates a way when you have a million different things you could be doing at any one time to prioritize those things. And hopefully everybody's in the same boat, rowing in the same direction if you have a plan. Otherwise, it's a little hard to get the boat to go anywhere. And so that's why you would want to do it. And so a comprehensive plan is this guide. It's designed to think about 10 to 15 years into the future. And it's designed to consider all the needs of the town and try to put those together as best we can. What it does not do is change an ordinance or create a new program or spend any money. When you get to that point, which was the implementation of the plan, then the town goes through the same processes it always goes through when it's making any of those kinds of decisions. Any spending will go through the select board and, you know, have to be approved by the town in the warrant. Any ordinances, the same thing, they'll go through the planning board, they'll go to the select board, and then they'll be voted on. So there's a number of steps for implementation. It doesn't just happen on its own. People have to be willing to work to get it to be implemented. But all the regular public processes that you normally go through when you're doing anything in town still apply. So a brief overview of the plan. The plan has a series of parts, but in the PDF form, there's 2 sections. So the first section has an executive summary, which talks about the process, the vision. It has the 3 key areas that the committee pulled out of all the work that we did with the public and the things that rose to the top most often. It has a future land use plan that tries to address those key areas as well as other things. And then it has a whole series of goals, policies, and strategies, which are all the sections of the plan and what the state requires and the way that we think about that, the way that we've pulled together to think about what are the kinds of ways the town can implement. Then it has an implementation plan and a grid that relates to that, that shows all those goals, policies, and strategies and tries to list out which ones are the most important, should be worked on first, which are the ones that can be worked on second, because obviously you only have so many people and so much energy and so much money and so much of everything, so you can't do all of them at one time. So the implementation plan tries to lay out a plan forward, a path forward for the town. So part 2 of the plan is the inventories and the other reports. So in the inventories, which we've talked about at multiple public meetings, there's a whole series of chapters with all the data that we could gather to try to understand where we are now and where we might be going. And those chapters are in part 2, and they have a detailed information. So in part 1, we sort of have summaries of that. In part 2, there's a lot of detail. There's also information about other town reports that we've used in building the comp plan and that exist with links to those. Yep, sorry. So the 3 highlighted areas are the 3 key issues that the town, that the committee came up with from our work with the town was first the working waterfront, and some of the highlighted recommendations of that are developing a right to fish ordinance, which I think the town is already working on. Land use review, both in terms of the shoreland zoning and reviewing and thinking about the interior zone that's not shoreland zoning, thinking about harbor management, reconstruction of the working waterfront, and enhancing and increasing water access. For protecting the environment, some of the highlights were further study of groundwater resources and use, working on, you already have some really good low impact development rules, but thinking about could those be better, could those be enhanced, continuing to enact the open space plan that exists, and to start to think about scenic views. Are there places that you want to protect because they're scenic? And then housing and development. So the highlights of that are the attainable housing plan development provisions, and then the planned attainable housing districts, which are the 2 town-owned pieces of land, and how those could be developed to create some affordable housing, and allowing accessory dwelling units, and also the changes to the future land use plan are all part of that housing and development. Anybody have any questions up to this point? Burning questions about the general layout of the plan? Okay. So the future land use plan. So your current land use ordinance has shoreline zoning, which has a series of districts within it, a series of zones within it. And then everything that's not shoreline zoning in town is called the interior zone. And so that means that everywhere else in town, the development that's allowed is the same, all through the town. The proposed land use districts leave the shoreline zoning the way it is, with the recommendation that it be reviewed, because it's been a while since it's been reviewed, and there should be some review of it, but not that there be major changes, but that we make sure that it's working for the working waterfront and it's doing what it needs to do. So that's the shoreline zoning part of it. The part that is changing is that the interior zone that exists now is proposed to have multiple districts within it, so that different things happen in different parts of town. In those land use, in that proposal, we have three main areas. We have maintaining the existing pattern, so trying to make sure that the zoning keeps the villages the way that they're villages and that it works with them. Controlled growth areas, which allow for some experimentation in terms of being able to, if someone wants to use their land to develop some smaller lots, that's allowed in a small portion of town. And then the rural area, which is the majority of the town, which is still the interior. And so why the change? What we heard from people was that having a variety of types of housing was really important. And in order for that to happen, there has to be a way to build, you have to have smaller lot sizes, because on 80,000 square feet, you can't, there's no affordable way to build housing that's affordable or attainable. You're always gonna see big houses built on lots that size. And so we looked at ways to create some smaller lot sizes, but that still respected the town's need for every house has to have septic, has to have a well. And so we worked hard to make sure that the way that we regulated it still provided for protection in those areas. So I'm gonna just go through So this is the map showing the proposed future land use. And then there were copies over at the table. One thing I want to make sure that I say right away is that that map is the one that was in the plan, but that map had a small error in it, in that the Dowdy Point attainable housing planned attainable housing district, which is right here where my mouse is. On the plan, it shows that whole property being part of that district, but in reality, it's just the top little square, the furthest south little square of that property. It's not the whole property. And if you look at either of the maps up front, if you want to check, they have that correct. Okay. So. We talked about the three different types of areas that there are. Not gonna make it a little. Okay, so I'm just gonna go through these, and then so that you can see them. You all had, that sheet was available over there with all that on it, so I'm not gonna read every word of it, because you can read it. But I just wanna make sure that I make it clear what it says. So the column in the middle is what's proposed. So the developed areas, this is what's proposed. On the right-hand side is what is existing now in that area. So in the developed areas, so these are areas that already have dense neighborhoods. We're keeping the lot size the same. We are allowing existing buildings on lots of a certain size to be divided into 2 units, as long as they have the same or fewer bedrooms than the existing house. We're still gonna allow retail and commercial. Currently, anything can be built there, any type of housing, any type of retail, commercial, industrial, institutional, governmental. There's nothing that says you can't build anything there. In the proposed, we would propose that it only be single-family houses and duplexes in that district. Then there are some standards of what sizes can be built, and there's a 5,000 square foot gross floor area maximum. Currently, there's none. We put in that there should be some small-scale New England design standards, and I know we've had some comments like, that's not very specific. It is indeed not very specific. It is intentionally not very specific because when the implementation committee gets together and starts working through the details of the ordinance, they will fill in the details of what that means, and they will do that through a public process, so people will have input when it gets to that. And one thing that we talked about was reducing setbacks to match the existing pattern of development, because the setbacks in the interior zone currently are fairly large, 40 feet from the traveled way and 20 feet from all other lot lines, which is about 90% of the parcels in these developed neighborhoods don't meet that standard already, so it makes it hard for anybody to do anything in those areas. And then we would limit increasing the number of bedrooms for any existing single-family home or teardowns. And then every single one of these will say something about continuing to enforce low-impact development solutions on all new development and redevelopment, and suggesting that the town review these requirements for enhancement. The goal of low-impact development is that water stays on the property, it doesn't run off, and that it is reused on that particular place, and also so that it doesn't run onto your neighbor or run into a stream, so it stays right there and goes back into the ground. The working waterfront villages are essentially the same set of regulations, except for allowing water-dependent marine businesses. And the size of those being if it's water dependent, it is allowed to be a slightly larger size business in those areas, and that you can have a larger maximum building size for a water dependent marine business versus other kinds of retail. But everything else is approximately the same. It does have a general thing that says support commercial fishing should be encouraged in those areas. And again, this is broad. Its intention is that as the ordinance is written, there's a public process and that people are working with the people for whom this has an impact, and they're able to have input into making those rules. The comp plan doesn't make the rules themselves. It gives a guidance as to this is the kind of thing we want to happen in these places. All right. So in the controlled growth areas, we have the mixed use district. So the purpose of the mixed use district is to allow for development of different types of housing, to allow smaller minimum lot sizes for houses with less bedrooms, and provides incentives to build attainable housing. It also provides for the development of small-scale village, retail, commercial, and service businesses in that mixed-use district. The mixed-use district takes up 2.8% of the town. So it The allowed types of residential are single family homes, duplexes, townhouses, or multifamily. It has 20,000 square feet for the first bedroom and 10,000 square feet for each additional bedroom. And if you picked up the sheet that had the standards, you can see what that means. But what it means is that a 3-bedroom house would be 40,000 square feet, which is the current standard for property not in a subdivision. It allows retail, commercial, office space with residential allowed on upper floors. If residential is on the second floor, it would allow the lot size to reflect the residential standard. Otherwise, it uses a ratio in which a 10,000 square foot floor area of a building would have to have an 80,000 square foot lot. And 10,000 square feet is the maximum, and I just put in here for comparison, the Bailey Island View Motel is 9,000 square feet. It requires the same kind of design standards and allows the attainable housing plan development, which replaces the current workforce housing provisions. The town has had a workforce housing provision in its ordinance for over 10 years, and it has never been used. The one workforce housing subdivision that was built before the workforce housing provision was added to your ordinance. So nobody's ever used it. It's fairly complicated and difficult to use. And so in all this time, it has not been used. So the Attainable Housing Work Group has worked hard to come up with a new plan that maybe is more workable for people. That plan allows for single-family, two-family townhouse style units. It would cluster open space development, so 50% of the set-asides has to be set aside as permanent open space. And the density would be 7,500 square feet per bedroom of the usable area of the parcel. So that is the attainable housing plan. So now we have the two planned attainable housing districts that are town-owned land. So those have essentially the same requirements, except that you can't develop any commercial in them. The only purpose of them is to build attainable housing with the 7,500 square feet per bedroom per lot, and the set aside of 50% of the parcel as permanent open space, and at least 70% of the dwelling units have to be in attainable housing standard, and that would be something that would be decided. The Affordable Housing Working Group has made some suggestions about that, but that would, again, be part of an ordinance, so it would still go through the same processes. And so this one is the Dowdy Point one, and I'll just say again that the map that you have, it's only a little piece of that property, not the whole property. And then the Mitchell Field planned attainable housing, so this has the same rules. The difference being that, so this is the part of Mitchell Field that in the Mitchell Field plan was set aside for attainable housing. And instead of it saying you have to set aside 50% of the land, it says you must set aside the balance of the upper meadow as permanent open space. Other than that, all the other standards are the same. And compared to what can be done in any of these places now, just a reminder that currently any type of residential can be built anywhere in town. It's 40,000 square feet if it's not in a subdivision, 80,000 square feet if it is in a subdivision. You can have retail, commercial, industrial, institutional, governmental. The lot sizes are the same requirement, and there's no design standards. The impact on groundwater is the same, that is already required. There's no set-asides for open space, and there are current LID standards. And then there's the Mitchell Field Marine Business District, which is part of the shoreland zone. We didn't change anything about that. It's exactly the way it is, so that's why it doesn't have that third column, because it's the same. So then in the rural areas, which includes the interior zone, the interior district, so it does get a little confusing. So you currently have an interior zone that is all the land that is not shoreline zoning. In this plan, there's an interior district, which is the land that is not part of any of those other districts that I just described. So it's smaller than what it was before. In that district, you would now only be able to build single-family and duplexes. For lots not in a subdivision, you would require 30,000 square feet for the first bedroom, 15,000 square feet for each additional bedroom. Currently, you can build any type of residential, there's no restrictions on it. And you can, and 40,000 square feet is for any parcel that's not in a subdivision. So if you were to build a 2-bedroom house, you'd have to have 5,000 square feet. In a subdivision lot, you would have to build, in the new plan, you would have 20,000 square feet for the first bedroom, 10,000 square feet for each additional bedroom, but it requires clustering of 50% of the land, clustering and 50% of the land to be put into preserved open space. And then the total number of units is derived from the remaining developable land. In essence, that doubles the size of each lot. So for each lot that you build, there's open space being created that's equal to the same size as that lot, right? So half of it you're cutting off right away, and then you can only build on half of that land. Currently, it's an 80,000 square foot minimum lot size for subdivisions, of which you have not had very many built in the last 10 years. And it says on that sheet exactly how many. In the interior zone, we're allowing marine-related businesses, including retail, commercial, and industrial, and a variety of small-scale other retail and commercial uses. Currently, you can build anything there. We have a floor area ratio, so that depending on the size of the building you want, it tells you the size of the lot you have to have. And we're creating a maximum building size of 30,000 square feet for a marine-related business and 10,000 square feet for any other type of business. There's currently no maximum building size, and they have the same lot sizes as residential, 40,000 and 80,000. For buildings 10,000 square feet and under, right now it just says everything should have small scale New England design standards. I think that probably should be changed, so that's why I started to change it. That's why it says only buildings under 10,000 square feet. So if the building is greater than 10,000 square feet, it doesn't necessarily have to have New England design standards. You could decide that it does. Like, that's really up to the committee as they go through things. But a 30,000 square foot warehouse for building boats probably doesn't need to have like lots of little peaks and, you know, look like a house. That would probably not be reasonable. And then this, in the interior zone, it would also allow the attainable housing plan developments, which we went through already. It's exactly the same as it was in the mixed use zone. And then finally, there's an island district, so we separated out all of the unbridged islands. And in those, we said you could only build single-family homes or duplexes. You have to have 120,000 square feet. The idea being that it's restricting development on those islands because they are costly for the town to provide services to. And then there's no commercial allowed except for marine-dependent commercial, specifically commercial docks and necessary structures. Again, we have the same floor area ratio. We capped it at 10,000 square feet for a commercial building. We recommended that we create scenic character requirements to ensure that shoreline development doesn't overwhelm scenic views, and buffering and setbacks when something is happening that's abutting a residential neighborhood on an island. We would like for there to continue to be a requirement that any island development secure mainland access and continue those same LID standards. Again, currently 40,000 square feet, 80,000 square feet, anything. And I think that is the end.
Thank you very much. There's lots of details here, and it's not necessary that everybody master all of these details. I think we need to keep the bottom line in mind. What we're trying to do here is take a scheme that we currently have in place, which essentially has shoreland zoning, that is land from the shoreline 250 feet inland, and then everything else is interior. We have two standards right now, 40,000 square feet for a single property, and then if it's in a subdivision, 80,000 square feet. What we're trying to do here essentially is to carve up in a reasonable way the property that we have in Harpswell, which is precious, let's put it that way. We need to be very careful. But carve it up in a way that will allow a little bit more diversity in what can be built in various areas. It's a change, and it needs to be thought about, and it needs to go through the process that we mentioned before. It needs to go before the town at a town meeting and voted on. But these were not done just to make things more complex. They were done in order to address a number of different needs that came to us as a result of our polling the town. At this point, I would like to turn it over to you to ask questions. If you have questions about any part of the plan that you've looked at, and hopefully we can address them, whether it's things about the future land use plan, whether it's about things that we said about transportation, whether it's something about the working waterfront, whatever. The floor is open for you to ask questions and to provide input to us on anything that you think is important for us to be aware of as we try to finalize this going forward. So, yes, and if you want to say something, you're all by yourself in this wonderful mic there. Hopefully it's on. But if you go there and identify yourself and let us know what you're thinking.
Hello? It's on.
I hate this spot more than just about anything I can think of. Can you hear me? Raise it. Hello? Hear me now? I'm sorry about my back, folks. So, I'm Courtney Stellings. I'm on the Affordable Housing Working Group. And I want to talk about really quickly, because I promised to be short, why having housing that is attainable is important in Harpswell. I've spoken to a lot of folks, walking around the neighborhoods. I'm not shy. I hate this. I'm shy with this. But I will talk to you one-on-one. Oh, I hear myself now. I will talk to you one-on-one and ask you, do you live in Harpswell? Where do you live? Do you have your own place? I live with my grandparents. I live with my parents. Are the answers. A restaurant worker. I can rent something during the winter. I can't find anything during the summer because I can't afford it. Small business owner who couldn't get reliable workers because they didn't want to commute from where they were living. It was too expensive. People asked her, are you going to provide housing? Well, no, not going to provide housing. So these are some of the people I spoke with. A fisherman who said, my daughter will never be able to live in Harpswell. Won't be able to afford it. And that's just not right. So, we propose that there, and older people also who want to downsize, house is too big, but where are they going to go? There's no place that they can afford to be able to move into. There's nothing for them. So we figure as a community, if we all work together, we should be able to make something happen. And I have an example of somebody who's trying to make something happen. She wanted to come tonight, but she said her eyes are bad, she can't drive at night. And I have told her I will leave her name out of it. For now, it's her story, not my story. But she said, I grew up in Harpswell. I'm very lucky to be able to live here. So this is what she proposes. Dear Town of Harpswell and Select Board, as recommended by the Town Housing Committee, which I guess is the Affordable Housing Working Group, I would like to start a fund for affordable housing in our town of Harpswell that creates purchases of land, houses, foreclosed or auction properties, and to accept donated properties and funds for the intentional address of this need in our town. Please accept my initial donation of $100 to start this fund. I would like to give this need and fund the title of Homesick for a Harpswell Home to Call My Own. From a personal note from my life, I was so homesick to settle into a home of my own in our beloved town of Harpswell. The miracle happened for me, and I will always be so thankful and grateful all the days of my life. I so wish that this opportunity be available for everyone who loves and desires to live and reside here in Harpswell. Thank you.
Who's next? Comments?
My name is Gordon Weil. I live in West Harpswell, and I have some comments on the draft that I'd like to contribute. I'd like to start by thanking the committee for what I think is an excellent and thoughtful job with a basic concept that is constructive and appropriate for the town. So my comments are not meant to be critical of the main thrust of the report, but rather to make some observations relative to it. One of the things that the chair said at the beginning was this is not a decision that's equivalent to an ordinance. It's a plan, it's a guide, and real hard decisions will have to be made in the future. And those decisions will affect some people in this town more than others, or could affect them, and it could have an impact on taxes, on the staffing of the town. I think it would be useful early in the report to make such a statement, to make it clear that this is not these decisions, but there will be decisions like this that grow out of the potential implementation of this plan. And in that light, I think there needs to be, if there can be between now and the time the plan is voted on, an enhanced effort to reach out to people who may be directly affected, whose ownership of their property could change, or the nature of that ownership if the plan were adopted, merely to let them know that the process is underway. I know there's been a good deal of outreach. In my view, there's no such thing as too much outreach. In connection with that, your expert talked about specific decisions made with regard to land use. And my understanding, and I would like to thank the chair for having been willing to answer a number of questions of mine in recent days. And my understanding from him is that some of these decisions are based on studies of soils and habitat in specific areas. And I think those studies need to be made available for public scrutiny. And I think an effort should be made to explain to people how, if you want to see them, you can see the studies that were used. My next observation has to do with some questionable terms that are used in the report that I think could cause problems unless they're made more specific. One of them, with regard to fishing, is the idea of discouraging nuisance complaints. I think you ought to drop that entirely. I think government saying anything that discourages the people from exercising their First Amendment rights is a mistake. And nuisance comments are just something we have to live with. We all have to live with it some way or another. And I think that it would not be suitable for the town of Harpswell to do anything that discouraged people from expressing themselves. Second and third are terms called informal water access and unreasonable groundwater impact. I think there's problems with the word informal and unreasonable that can lead to difficulty later and dispute later. Informal, I think you probably mean voluntary, that is to say, not by adverse possession. And I think you ought to say voluntary instead of informal. I think with regard to unreasonable, you ought to define unreasonable or just say, protect the general water quality. The proposed plan speaks about potential financial support for fishing, for the fishing community. I'm not raising any objection to that, but what I see is another area where if at least the question of potential financial support should be raised, it's in the area of transportation. Should we have, for example, some kind of subsidized transportation for what is obviously an older population to reach shopping areas and so on? And maybe that needs financial support as much as fishing does. One other area that is mentioned, there's some mention of the selectmen's meeting with non-resident taxpayers being supported. An excellent idea that I had some involvement with at the origin. But what I see is missing is any reference to the town meeting itself. And it seems to me that there ought to be a reference in the plan to efforts to maximize participation in the town meeting. I think it is one of the reasons why our taxes are so much lower than Brunswick's, is that we have a town meeting and they have a town council, and I would strongly encourage we do everything to maintain the town meeting, and it ought to find its way into the plan. Last comment about the substance is public outreach. I think the Harpswell Bulletin should come out on a more regular schedule and more often than it does. The town is fortunate, I think, to have the television, the anchor, and the anchor is going to get to be more important based on news in the Times Record today, where it's about to retreat very significantly from what it's been doing. But those are not run by the town. They're not official. The people who manage them can put in what they want and not put in what they don't want. The town needs to have a regular, official source of information going out to people electronically and in print on a regular basis, which would enhance the entire public process of the town. And so I would like to see that referred to in the plan. Those are my comments. I have one that's just a personal hobby horse. You mentioned in the plan the number of places on the historic register in the town. This town has 2 places that are national landmarks, which are much fewer in number than places on the historic register. And I'm very into this, and I think it would be nice if you mentioned the 2 landmarks, which are the town building in Harpswell Center and Admiral Peary's home on Eagle Island. Christie once told me that somebody in the federal government said we may be the smallest town in the United States to have 2 historic landmarks. I think it's worth bragging about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other comments from the...
Shorter. I'm David Bright on Great Island. I also was looking at the right to fish idea, and my question is, it seems like everything else is the town can do, but right to fish would be a state initiative, a state law, so I wonder if there's discussion about how you might advocate for that.
Don't be shy. Okay.
Hi, I'm Gina Snyder. I live on Great Island. And I just wanted to sort of ditto on what Gordon said about the studies behind some of it, because I was a little surprised about the 7,500 square foot per bedroom in terms of sewer and water support. And there's a lot of, Mitchell Field, the things under Mitchell Field and the neck is kind of a different geology than some of the ledgier areas on the different islands, Wars Island, etc. I had a question that maybe somebody could clarify. The yellow area off of Mountain Road on the map, is that entire area mixed use proposed?
Yes.
And currently, it's not mixed use, right?
Currently, it's part of the interior zone, so any type of housing can be built there, any type of commercial can be built there. There's no limit in your current ordinance to the size of commercial buildings. There's nothing that says what type of housing can be developed there under the mixed use. It specifically says which types of housing can be built there and which types of commercial can happen there.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I also had another question about attainable housing. If you build it in those areas on town land, does it stay attainable, or does it somehow over the years pass out of that?
Well, I will do my best to answer that question, but the Affordable Housing Work Group has been working on that, and in those two districts, it would be required that those properties remain affordable. So there's a variety of mechanisms that can be used for that to happen, and I don't think that one particular one has been chosen yet. Is that correct? Okay. So there's a variety of legal ways you can do that. You can, like the way Habitat for Humanity does it, where when you buy the house, when you do your sweat equity to get the house, when you leave the house, you get some of that equity, but most of the equity goes back to Habitat, and the house stays affordable. So when it gets turned over, so there's ways to do that, and I'm not the right person to give you the details of that, but they would be required to have some legal way that stays that way.
And just to also second Gordon, there's a National Civil Engineering Historic Landmark at the Cribstone Bridge. So.
Yes.
Jeannie Rubio, Great Island. I had a good surprise the other day, and so this is kind of a question. I was looking at the Maine State website, and it said that the comprehensive plan can be used to document the need for good neighbor standards. And I don't even know if we've ever had any good neighbor standards, but certainly 100 years ago, things were very different, a lot less people. Now we have the same amount of land, more people over the last 20 years and growing. And so I'm wondering if at some point you could recommend good neighbor standards. I mean, we have more problems than we used to. There's light pollution, there's noise pollution, trash. I mean, there's all kinds of things that neighbors have issues with each other on. And if we could, as a town, come up with just some basics, it would probably be helpful. So, that's all.
Amy Heibel, Harpswell Neck. I'm on the planning board, and I sat on this committee for the comp plan, and I would reiterate else suggested that perhaps we didn't really need to focus on the details of the plan. I think you do need to focus on the details of this plan. Can people hear me? Okay? Okay. I think you do need to focus on the details of this plan. Judy mentioned that rural character was something that could be maintained in the interior district, which covers about 90% of the town. Lot sizes are being reduced, proposed to be reduced in that district. And just because you can put water and sewer on a piece of property doesn't mean you can retain its rural character. When we started this discussion almost 3 years ago, I handed out papers at the recycling center. I talked to hundreds of people. Brian Hurst was with me. There were 3 issues that came up over and over and over again. One was rural character, one was potable water, the other one was commercial fishing. And as we began our discussions, affordable housing also came up, and so those were the 4 top issues. This comprehensive plan has dealt largely with 2 of those, and they are important issues: affordable housing and commercial fishing. But we have not really discussed maintaining rural character, and we have not really done enough to ensure that people will have potable water. I talked to dozens of people during the course of this 3 years, one person of which had to install a $50,000 system to deal with the saltwater intrusion in his property. Probably most of you know of people that have had difficulty finding potable water, or increasing difficulty getting potable water. Reducing lot sizes and increasing densities is not going to help solve that problem. I also sit on the planning board. I would like to know how small-scale New England design standards can be enforced in developments. Is there going to be a panel that's going to do design review to make sure that those design standards are met? Or is that something that the planning board is going to have to do? I think that's a real deep hole. Furthermore, sitting on the planning board, we have a lot of developers who come in who are local folks who don't have the money to hire a lot of high caliber people who can do expensive studies for their projects. If we go with higher densities, we're going to have to ask for hydrogeologic studies to make sure that folks don't use up available groundwater and cause problems for people nearby them. That's going to have to be done for us to do our job, because we have to, part of our job on the planning board is to make sure that there's no adverse reactions or adverse impacts from development. In order to do that, we will have to do more intense studies, and that will cost money. We're also going to have to, this is an issue that stands out for me, maybe it won't for you. We are proposing in this plan to allow 1-bedroom housing development on 30,000 square feet. Right now, the minimum lot size is 40. That is not a big change, really, and I don't know that the cost difference between 30,000 and 40,000 square feet in Harpswell is really going to make something affordable. But this is the catch. If you develop on a 30,000 square foot lot on some of these proposed rules, you can only do 1 bedroom. 1 bedroom. What happens if you have another child, or you decide you'd like to add another bedroom on? You can't do it. Right now, we have 40,000 square foot lot. If all you can afford to put on your house is a 1-bedroom unit, that's fine. 5 years down the road, you have a second child, you want to add another bedroom, you can do that. As long as you can meet the setbacks, you can do it. And you can put in, your septic system can handle it. With this proposal, if you have a 30,000 square foot lot and it's got 1 bedroom on it, if you want to build a second bedroom, you're going to have to sell that lot and find something else. And again, we have to demonstrate that development will not unreasonably impact groundwater. As Gordon said, how do you do that? You're going to have to require more intense studies in order to do that. The last thing I just want to say is rural character. What does rural character mean for you? And I don't know what it means for you, ask yourself. But Harpswell is one breath away from Brunswick, which is developing like gangbusters. And that push is right on our doorstep. And we have to be really careful or it will come here. And the thing that's keeping it from coming here is that we don't have public water and sewer. That's what's keeping it. But that means that if we try to increase densities, we really have to protect groundwater. Because once it's gone for somebody, it's gone. And once rural character's gone, rural character's gone. Traffic in and out of Brunswick has been increasing. As we add density and we add more people, we're going to have to deal with that as well. This plan has not addressed that. But somewhere down the line, we're going to have to. Thank you.
George Burns from Harpswell. First, I'd like to talk about the process. I sit on this committee, and I understand there's nothing we can do about the weather, and the informative meetings were canceled. But there's no intent to reschedule them, and a lot of people have not been informed about this plan. There's been very little notice. And a lot of people aren't here tonight. I've sent text messages and emails to folks, and they said, how can I come comment on the plan if I don't know what the plan is? The reason we're here tonight on April 11th is because this is going to be voted on May 11th, and the law says we have to have a hearing, this hearing, 1 month before the vote. What it doesn't say is that we have to vote on May 11th on this. We don't have, we could do it at the June town meeting. We could do it next March. We could never do it. There's no law that says we have to have a comprehensive plan intact. It's a recommendation that we work on the comprehensive plan. So that's, with the process, I feel like we could take more time. I've asked some questions while at committee, and I'm going to ask them again because I want people to know what the answers were. The mixed use portion, the yellow down on Harpswell Neck, how did that end up there?
While we went through the process, we had at least two land use meetings where people came. We had maps, people drew on them, we pulled all that information together, along with a series of data layers, including soils and habitat and constraints related to slopes. And we put those all together and looked for the areas where there was still developable land, and it had the best possible soils, of which, you know, Harpswell does not have great soils, but they had the best soils available and had the least amount of conservation land and habitat and other things in those places, and that's how we drew those. And then we talked about them in the committee. They were bigger, we made them smaller. Some things moved around because we looked again at the data and we wanted to make sure that things were in the places that were the most likely to be able to absorb the potential for some greater density.
That's not where the mixed use portion was originally placed though, is it?
That's true.
And so did the people have a chance after it was moved to comment?
Well, it's been out there, the map's been out there for a long time. It's been at multiple public meetings, it's been on the website, it's been given out at multiple meetings, and we've been asked people to comment on where those locations were and to give us feedback on that.
Multiple public meetings, one meeting at Cundy's Harbor.
No,
The
that
other
map was
two were
out,
canceled.
that map was out before that, so.
The map may have been out, but the meetings were not, there was only one meeting. So my next question would be, do we have to have a mixed use on Harpswell Neck?
You don't have to have the mixed-use district at all. You don't have to have it in any particular location. You are asking the state for a exemption from having growth zones because it did not, the committee decided that they did not want to have a particular part of town where we were directing 70% of the growth. That's what the state requires. The committee decided that they would like to ask for an exemption from that rule. Part of that is going to be them looking at our future land use plan and saying, did we address the things that we heard, and is the plan meeting the needs of the community? It's up to the committee to decide, and the town, when you vote, whether what you have meets the needs of the community.
So it does not have to be on there.
It does not.
Were any of the neighbors down there contacted? Again, I guess you're gonna say it's public, right?
Well, I will say that we have reached out as best we can. We have not gone to people's houses. That's not part of what I was hired by the town to do. The committee can certainly do that if they want to.
Couple things. First, as far as the timeline that we're talking about here, the rescheduling of meetings and so on. Obviously, we drew a bad hand over the last 10 days or so as far as canceling information meetings. We were really hoping that we could do this meeting at Kellogg Church, specifically because we knew there'd be a lot of interest in that mixed-use area there. It didn't happen. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to place emphasis on this particular meeting and so on and so forth. Nothing says that we can't try to reschedule meetings. Depending on what the feeling here is, we may have to do that. And my view as the chair is we'll do whatever we have to do to make sure people feel as though they're informed and they're comfortable and they understand what's going on. As far as the timeline is concerned, the hope was that we could bring this together and have a vote at a special town meeting in May. That meeting has not actually been set in stone, is that correct? Correct. So, we don't have a date in May firmed up yet, and it may not happen in May. We may not be able to make all the ends meet to make it happen in May. So I guess what I'm telling you is that there's flexibility as far as I'm concerned. We'll do whatever we have to do to make sure that the folks that are directly involved with this or impacted by this get a fair shake in terms of feeling comfortable and getting the information that they need. I think, what was the other question about your other question about, I can't, it flew out of my head.
Just basically, I wanted to make the point that we don't have to have that mixed use on there.
That's right.
I mean,
that's right. You know, this is a draft. This is recommendations, as Judy said, based on some studies that were done and said, hey, this area looks like it's reasonable to accommodate mixed-use development. That's what that area says. Whether it ends up being that way or not, we don't know. And I would also point out that there are lots of other factors that are involved here. I mean, you know, that might be a very favorable area in terms of developing properties and so on. But the question is somebody going to buy it? Is somebody going to put the money up to develop it? And so on and so forth. There are bigger issues or bigger forces involved than just putting a blot on a map and saying that's where things are going to happen. So I would just ask you to keep that in mind as well.
so next I'd like to talk quickly about Mitchell Field, and I'm going to try to keep this to the comprehensive plan portion of Mitchell Field and not get into a big discussion about Mitchell Field. But I'd like to read the top paragraph, or the only paragraph, future land use plan about Mitchell Field. The purpose of this designation is to carry out the recommendation of the Mitchell Field Master Plan by making a small portion of the town-owned land available at low to no cost for development of attainable housing that meets the needs of a variety of residents as identified in the report of the Affordable Housing Working Group, creating opportunities for attainable housing. If you are able to go to the Mitchell Field Master Plan, it does not resemble the wording in that paragraph. I have a map here in my hand. It's got, I don't know exactly how many, I didn't count. Townhouses, multi-family units, single resident dwellings. I would suggest that everybody look at that before they pass this comprehensive plan, because it is part of it. And this is a question that I have not asked at committee. We just learned that the mixed use does not have to be on there. Does the housing portion have to be on the comprehensive plan at Mitchell Field, or Dowdy Point for that matter?
The future land use plan is what the town decides it should be. There's no state requirement for any particular district as long, I mean, except that it does require growth zones unless you can get an exemption. So if you can't get an exemption, then you have to have some kind of growth zone.
So is the answer yes or no? Could it be removed?
Yes.
That pretty much ends everything, every question I have then.
Okay, I think we have the chair of the Mitchell Field Committee here in the audience. Can you clarify exactly what the master plan says about housing in that area at this point?
Spike Heibel, Chair of the Mitchell Field Committee. The original master plan in 2006 that is when the first housing component was proposed at the top of Mitchell Field. It involved reconfiguring the road system. The water tower was still there. There was no phone tower at that point. And so it had a nice little diagram, kind of a land use drawing of how you could squeeze, and I don't remember the number of units in there, parking, et cetera, and I think that, and I wish Don Miskell was here to help me out, but at one point, the developer came and looked at it. The town sort of went out and asked around, and basically said, you know, we can't afford, if we put housing in there, it won't pay. And so the whole subject sort of died away. In the second master plan, in the update, which was long in coming, in 2019, we just basically reiterated that affordable housing of some sort, or senior housing, was a possibility at the field, but we didn't do anything specific about it. And at that time, the water tower when did it come down, Dave? 2000, whatever. And then the cell tower went up. It changed a lot of what the original plan suggested. So it's a wide open question down there, how the property would be used up there. But we have to remember at Mitchell Field that we did a townwide survey, which there were over almost 800 responses to the survey that said, a lot of people said, don't mess around with Mitchell Field. Don't cover it with housing. Don't cover it with solar panels. Don't, put a whole lot of business down there. We would like it for open space, and that. So we can't just look at Mitchell Field only as an opportunity for development. There's a lot of other values that people have for it.
So I just looked at the drawing quickly while he was speaking, and if the drawing is accurate to the numbers, it's 6 multi-family units and 7 single home dwellings, just for information purposes. And again, if as the plan is written with the mixed use and the housing on Mitchell Field, I'd recommend we remove those. And if not, I recommend we vote the plan down. This committee passed this plan by a vote of 7-3. There's 11 people on the committee. One was not there. The night the plan was passed, and it had to pass. It had to pass so that we could get to this point. You can't present a plan if you don't have it, so I understand that. But it did not pass unanimously. It passed 7-3, and 7 people should not be deciding what the future of Harpswell is going to look like 10 years from now. Everybody needs to speak. Thank you.
My name is Matt Gilley. I live in Cundy's Harbor. I also sit on the task force, and I sit on the Harbor and Waterfront Committee as well. I'll kind of piggyback off of what George said, and I mentioned this at one of the committee meetings. I pride myself in, I'm pretty involved with community events. Our state representative, Jay McCrae, can attest to that. I go up to the State House in Augusta and testify. I volunteer my time for the town. I don't have kids, so the way I contribute to the world is I volunteer my time. So I like to be involved in stuff like this. I've applied to multiple committees. There was never an application process that I ever saw that appeared on the town's website, and I watch the town's website pretty closely, so I'm up to date on stuff. The town actually posted the notice for this meeting 6 hours ago on their Facebook page, and it was pretty hard to find on the website. So I don't think that I'm pretty impressed with the people that showed up for such short notice. And unless you drove across Mountain Road, you didn't see the lit up sign. I led the meeting in Cundy's Harbor, the informational meeting, and we had a pretty good turnout. There was a pretty good discussion there, and a lot of it centered around the working waterfront and what more we could do for the working waterfront in this town. And I think we did a real disservice by not having those 2 other informational sessions. Especially where those were going to be centered around where the mixed-use zones were. A lot of those people aren't even aware of the zoning changes that are coming to the land that they own. And just based on the 40 or 50 people and the input we received at Cundy's Harbor, where none of these zoning issues were affecting those people, I can't imagine the turnout we would have had if we had held those meetings. When I joined the committee last November, I am probably the youngest person on the committee. I'm the only person I think on the committee of an age that I don't have children, but everybody else is above the age where they would have adult children at this point. There is next to no input on this plan from younger people in this town. It is not comprehensive, in my opinion. That we alienated a lot of people in this process. I think the committee was handpicked by a couple of people, and I think there has been some wonderful leaps made at the end, but I think it was too late to save. I think there's more work that needs to be done. I think it's heading in the right direction, but I think we're trying to save face and doing a disservice by doing so at this point. Thank you.
My name is Bruce Davis. I live on Oars Island. First off, I'd like to thank the people that took the time and effort to work on this. We certainly have some issues here in town as far as housing goes. But I'm curious. This last comprehensive plan is almost 20 years old now. This one follows the same suit. We're a long way into the future. So a lot of the development that we have in town happened when boats were the normal form of travel. So we developed little fishing villages around fishing coves. And we're a cluster of villages, basically. Harpswell is a cluster of villages, but that's changing, and the automobile has made it quite a bit different than it used to be. And 20 years from now, I would like to think we're going to have more of a town center. The mountain road sort of connected the 2 peninsulas. The Harpswell town office is in the center of town. We have more post offices in Harpswell than any other. We have more post offices per capita than any other town in the state. And so it's reasonable to think that we're going to have one post office 20 years from now, if there's still a post office. I think the town is ready to support this is going to make a small grocery or bank branch was looking in town to locate. And I don't know where you're steering sort of a town center. It looks like this mixed growth, mixed development district is where you're kind of thinking that's going to happen. Is that fair to say? No? Well, I think the Mountain Road is that's a place where it likely should happen. And mixed growth is, the mixed development zone that you have here sort of suggests that could happen. But I'm a real estate broker in town, and I know these lots like the back of my hand, and virtually everything in that yellow district on the Mountain Road has deed restrictions against anything other than single-family residential. So while that's, if you're going to have a bank branch or a small grocery or a real estate office or an insurance office, you need road frontage. And virtually everything on that road, from 24 all the way to the town office, you can't do anything. You can't do anything like that. So, I think we need to think about where we're going to do that. And one of the things that the town has, there's a lot of ordinances that conflict with each other. So, impervious surface makes a small lot in the village area impossible to put a service. Like, my office is on the outskirts of Oars Island. I would have loved to put it down towards the villages, but it was virtually impossible because we have we need to have so many parking lot spaces for how many employees and square footage. And then once you get to a certain spot, then you've broken the impervious. So those things conflict with each other. So while I think housing is our biggest problem, I also would like to see some, where are the services going to be? Where is town center going to be 20 years from now? Are we encouraging that to take place? And if on the Mountain Road there's, on the Harpswell side of the Ewing Narrows, the highest traffic count in town is corner 123 and Mountain Road. That seems to be a place that could support that type of thing, and there are not deed restrictions once you get across the Ewing Narrow Bridge. So, anyway, that's my comment.
Good evening. My name is Tim Tier. I'm from Harpswell. And first, I would like to echo comments that were made tonight because it's great to be here and listen to what everybody has to say. Part of what we're supposed to do is to be listening, and I heard some very important things that echo some of my own thoughts. The second speaker, and the last speaker both said thank you to all of you for the time and effort you put into the comprehensive plan, and I'd like to echo that. But it's important because the plan contains a lot of detail. And particularly, the second part 2 of the plan contains a significant amount of detail. And that detail is what is behind much of my comments. The second thing is, I didn't catch their names, but the first speaker, I believe your name is Courtney, is that correct? Well, how about that? It's the first time I remembered anyone's name. So, I also want to recognize that I completely agree that there is an attainable housing issue in Harpswell, and there's a lot we need to do to think about how to solve that problem. It's not an area of expertise of mine, so I'm not going to talk about it, except to say I completely agree with you that there are many possible solutions. And that woman who wrote the letter created the opportunity for innovation. I believe that's exactly what the town needs to do, and which leads me to the reason I'm here tonight and making the points I'm going to make. I'm an ecologist by my profession, and so I looked very carefully at the plan and a lot of the ecological information that's in it. And the important part is that the plan specifies 3 primary priorities, which are housing, the working waterfront, and the environment. So this is going to lead me to specifically the Downey Point Road Attainable Housing District, unit, whatever they call it. And the challenge with that is it unnecessarily pits one of the priorities for the town, which is housing, against another priority of the town, which is the environment. And in that plan, I identified that there are 10 reasons why that particular site should be protected at all costs. And one of them, just to put it out there, is that it's already designated as not buildable. There are maps in the plans that say it's not buildable. Okay, well maybe we have to avoid those or forget those because you're talking about potential changes. But another critical thing that's been raised by one of the other people here is the whole issue about protecting our groundwater, our potable water, and how important it is. Now I would argue that the first step that you would want to do to protect our groundwater would be to not build in a wetland. This property has multiple wetlands on it, and it has one wetland in particular that's identified on some maps, but not these. And it's also quite likely that there's, it's called wetlands of statewide significance, that it has a wetland of statewide significance on it. If that is true, then the borders around it make it so that that entire property is virtually unbuildable. You would not want to put any development there. Another part of the plan recognizes that straight through the middle of that property is an area that's been designated as likely to flood in high water events. Now we've also talked about the fact that saltwater intrusion is a major issue. So I guess I'm questioning the wisdom of proposing to put a development on a property that has a wetland, that's in a floodplain, and is likely to be contaminated if there is flooding that happens. Now, the other issue, and the final issue I'll make, because I know everyone wants to get home, is that this area is connected to really important priority coastal wetlands. And next to those priority coastal wetlands are other priority areas identified in the plan that are coastal areas of significance. It's pretty clear that if you put any significant development at the top of a perched wetland, it is going to influence the way that that wetland functions. And these other priority areas in the plan will be impacted. So I look at it and say, you have other opportunities for attainable housing. But if you develop one of the largest undeveloped sites in the plan that is clearly capturing significant freshwater resources for the town, if you develop that, there's no going back. There's no other option. So I propose to the committee and those looking at, as was said, the details in this plan, yes, we must address attainable housing, but I would say no, that is not a well-planned site to do it. Thank you.
I'm Roberta Weil, the other half of the Weil family, and I guess I'm going to have the pleasure of closing this up tonight. First of all, I also appreciate all the work that you have done. I am sorry that you didn't address the problem of our aging population, because that deals also with the housing issue and the cost of housing in Harpswell. And if you put in affordable, excuse me, what do you call it now, not affordable housing? Attainable housing, you're just going to attract more old people. And one of the reasons for that is the absence of a school on Harpswell Neck. And I think there are a number of people here tonight who either went to Harpswell, West Harpswell School, or have had their children in West Harpswell School. And that was a school, I'm not sure that people even know this, that the parents of a lot of the students went down and built part of it themselves in the evenings after work, so that we would have an adequate school for our kids. And I think that if we put in attainable housing, all we're going to do is allow those of us who are elderly, if we wish, to downsize and move into a smaller place and have our now middle-aged and old children come and live in our houses. And I think that would be a very unfortunate development. But I do hope that you will go back and look at educational opportunity for children in Harpswell, because it doesn't exist in West Harpswell. It doesn't exist from the mountain road, really, all the way down to the end of Potts Point. And I think that is very unfortunate for us. Yeah. And thank you very much, and for having done all this work, and I know that we're all looking forward to voting on it at some point in the future. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Allison Hawks, Cundy's Harbor. I'll thank everyone for their work too. This is a lot of work, a lot of reading, as you can see. I wanted to first start with that. I was a little disappointed that you guys didn't reschedule the other 2 meetings before you had this public forum. Good. It's not used to being quiet. So I was looking forward to attending those other 2 meetings. I did go to the first one. I had many questions. None of them were answered, and they're still not being answered. So I agree with Gordon. I would love to see the town have better communication with the town. I found out about this meeting last minute. I had to dig in the website to find it. You guys are all over the place on having to dig for stuff on the website. It shouldn't be so hard to get information. That information should be coming to my home in a publication so that everyone knows what's going on, because a lot of people have no idea that this is going on. Attainable housing, it's probably going to be an unpopular view. We all would love attainable housing. I think people would love attainable housing everywhere. But I don't know why we're so fixated on it in Harpswell. We can't make more land, and we can't make the land affordable. It's not a Harpswell issue to try to get people to come live here, and we continue to use people like, I'm gonna say I'm a multi-generational fishing family, and I run a wharf. So I know about needing help, and all of our helpers have lived out of town. And they have no problem coming down here to work. And you know what? The commercial fishing isn't going to go away because they don't have affordable housing for them to live here. But you know what make it go away? Not having access to it. That should be the biggest focus that we have in this town. That all the coastline that we have to ourselves in this one little town, the most in the country. And when I'm looking in here and I see that the non-resident moorings are up, resident moorings are way down. What is that telling you? It's telling you that we're losing it to people from out of state. I don't know how we're gonna control that. We can't control, but we're not focusing on keeping the access to it, because then in another chart, it shows that we have water access and we've lost 14% more of it. We're not focusing on that. Commercial fishing should be the #1 focus in this town. I'm sorry if that's not a popular view. That's what this town was built on, was fishing. And tourism, we need that. The right to fish, we've talked about that, and in my eyes, that should come before this comes. We need to have that before this exists, because When you're talking about allowed commercial uses at Mitchell Field or at Dowdy Point, and it says allowed commercial uses is none. So does that exclude commercial fishing? Because we store traps on our property, we store boats on our property. And that excludes us from in these where you want to build. So I don't think some of this stuff has been very well thought out for us. And if you want to get commercial fishermen to engage, you're gonna have to leave the building. You're gonna have to come to the wharfs, you're gonna have to talk to them. They work from early morning and they're still working now. And you're gonna have to find a way to figure out how to get their voices heard. I don't know how that is. I live in that family and it's hard to do it. But if you wanna have a comprehensive plan that includes us, then you need to come to us, because I agree with Matt. I look around this room and it's disappointing. We have no youth and we don't have a lot of commercial fishing representation. And I also think that's because we get ignored a lot and we're looked down a lot in this town. So that's just my thoughts. That's all I have for now. Thanks.
Brian Moody from the NEC, and I was just concerned a little about the meetings that were canceled and not rescheduled. I live in the proposed mixed-use area that says no commercial fishing. Does that mean I can't have my boat at my house? It's really sad that these meetings weren't rescheduled. They should be rescheduled. This should be pushed back so we know more about what's going on. There's this proposed low income, or whatever you want to call it, at Mitchell Field. Is it going to be for Harpswell people or people from away that are old that want a cheap house? It seems crazy. This isn't a low-income town. Why are we building low-income houses? The last low-income property that was built that I know of down here, a friend of mine sold his house and made $120,000 on it. Why is that right? Why wasn't it kept low income? I think there's a lot of work to do here before it's voted upon. Thank you.
John Hill, the NEC, new resident here in January. I sold in Florida finally. Was there for 19 years. I have one question on the voting for this plan. Is it an up or down vote, or will it be broken into sections? The reason I say that, if it's an up and down vote, you shouldn't do any more work on it because it's not going. Thank you.
Well, as sorry I am is to say this, but this is exactly the kind of feedback and input that we needed. If we have to work on this plan more to make it right, we'll do it. And we're not going to force feed anything down the town's throat without the town being supportive. We have a lot of work to do, obviously. But the reason we had this meeting was to get the kind of feedback that you have given us, and that's very valuable. We're going to have a meeting tomorrow night. We're going to review these inputs and comments. As far as rescheduling the meetings, the fact that they were not rescheduled up to now at the Orson Bailey Island and Harpswell and Kellogg Church doesn't mean that they can't be rescheduled. We just haven't made that decision yet because we were waiting, quite frankly, to see what was going to come out of this meeting. We've heard that message loud and clear, and we'll try to figure out a way to make that happen. So I guess we have one more speaker, Marianne.
You do. Can you hear me? No. No? Oh my heavens. I just wanted to say one thing.
thing that I was really hoping to see be more popular was a place for obtainable housing. And I know that we picked one spot was picked in the first time, and it didn't seem to be the right spot. And the group and Judy, we picked 2 more spots. I gotta get closer, okay. My concern is, one of the things that everybody in town wants is obtainable housing. And we're fixating on where this is right now. But 2 of the town lands that are owned by the town are places that make it a possibility because the land does not have to be purchased. That being said, the other areas that were chosen were in what we call the interior district. I'm wondering, by having another meeting to pick another place, if then you have the people in that place who are very concerned. Maybe we should come up with a percentage that can be figured out with more study. I don't know. I would hate to see us not pass the plan because we all want something but can't figure out where to put it. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. It's 8:15. We've been going pretty hot and heavy here for a good time. And again, I just want to thank you all for coming out tonight and expressing your opinions. This was the whole purpose for having this meeting. If we have to have more meetings before people feel comfortable with where we are on this, then we'll try to make it happen for sure. And I'll be working with the town staff and select board and obviously the task force to work on making this and bringing it to a point where everybody feels comfortable. Let's face it, we're not going to solve everybody's problems or satisfy everybody. That's reality. But we can certainly refine some of the things that have been put in the draft and make it better. So again, thank you very much. Appreciate your participation and thank you.